Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC and I'm back with the first video of 2022 with a little adventure that we went on back in November. And when I say we, I'm talking about myself, my friend Richard and his incredibly outrageous purchase of a 1951 Morris Minor.
Yeah,
and
it was a bit outrageous.
It was a bit outrageous when you didn't tell your mum and dad that you were bringing it home, but that's besides the point. Now this video we decided to film because it was a little bit different, and we have long had conversations about people buying Morris Minors and then saying, oh, I'm too frightened to go more than 20 miles, I can't do it, I'm so scared. And so we said we're going to take this car that's over 70 years old and we're going to drive it over 200 miles from Huddersfield down to Somerset and show people how we do it. And the video is quite madcap, isn't it? Because the mic broke, the weather was crazy at one point.
Yeah, it was just like a sort of fly on the wall sort of style mockumentary at times, but it was good fun though. It was good to do. It was good.
That's what we've done in the video, and as Richard was telling me before, there were magazines back in the day. What's the magazine called?
Oh, because it's all like Nuffield organisation, and they had, I think it was like Teamwork and like in-house magazines, and you know, when these cars were new, got to remember that it was export, 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 and they all went to far-flung places, Australia, Canada, all these sorts of places, and they covered vast miles. You think about these open wildernesses, people were driving around, they do all sorts of crazy mileage, really, in all honesty, but that was their car.
Yeah, and now
they used it.
People are going crazy over doing 20 miles to a local show. So what we wanted to do was show you that it's completely possible to buy one of the oldest Morris Minors out there, do over 200 miles. Hasn't it only done some crazy mileage? How many miles has it done?
The mileage is a bit weird. It's done about 70,000 miles, but it had done 60,000 by 1960. So since 1960, it's only done 10,000 miles.
And we were a bit silly really, because we had no breakdown, did we? We just decided to crack on and do this trip. And we had a brilliant time. So without further delay, we'll show you our madcap video of life on the A-roads from Huddersfield down to Somerset. And we'll start the video off with Richard buying the car from a man who was also called Richard. And if you're watching this, previous Richard, we're really sorry that we didn't get the car towed home like we told you we were going to, and actually secretly we drove it. So let's crack on. Good? Is that right? We've done a lot of Morris Minors on IDRIVEACLASSIC, so in today's video I handed the reins over to Richard and said, tell me everything you think people need to know about this particular car. So first of all, if you didn't already know this, the Morris Minor was launched at the Earls Court Motor Show in 1948. And initially, you could only get a two-door saloon or an open tourer, which, in other words, is a convertible. The four-door saloon you see here today was launched pretty much 2 years later, and it was meant to be a slightly more upmarket, better equipped, and consequently more expensive version of the car. And it took advantage of a slight reworking of the side valve engine, not long after the four-doors model's launch, which was around engine number 77,000. And it had some really good upgrades, things like a water pump, thermostat, and an interior heater, which, by the way, you were going to have to pay extra for. The previous versions, you could have only got a thermosyphon engine car, which meant that the heater had to be fitted using a Smith's auxiliary water pump kit, and it went onto the dynamo body, and essentially it was just a massive faff. This made it a lot more modern. Now, engine-wise, this car doesn't have an A-series in. It has a Morris 4-cylinder side valve engine, the USH M3 engine. It's 27.5 brake horsepower, and it's a 918cc engine. The reason it's not an A-series is because, of course, the Austin-Morris merger only came about in 1952, and in fact the engine in this was originally used in the Morris 8. This particular car is a really early example of the four-door Minors and is very lesser spotted. Now, it doesn't move on much from the low-light because you do see a lot of low-light bits, like the cowling on the front of the inner wings where the low-light headlamps would have been either side of the grille, and therefore this is often referred to as a short bonnet. It was replaced with the far more common full-length bonnet by the end of the year. It also has some very unique features only seen on early four-doors, such as the chrome trim around the rear window rubber, swivel-type ashtrays inserted into the front door cards, and things like the painted grille and hubcaps. Now, you might think this might have been for austerity, but it was actually because the Korean War caused a nickel shortage. It meant that people just couldn't do the amount of chroming that needed to be done. So Morris just decided to paint a couple of the normally chromed bits in the body colour as a short-term solution. But what happened was later on down the line, a lot of people, once chrome was available, would just swap it over. So a lot of finer details like this have been lost in the passing of time. However, that's not the only interesting thing about this car, because this car shouldn't be in the UK at all. When it was made in 1951, it was made as an export left-hand drive four-door Series Morris Minor and finished in the paint shade Thames Blue. The Thames Blue was only used very briefly by Morris from late 1950 to mid 1952. Other colours you could have got at the time were Miss Green, Gascoigne Grey, and of course good old black, which continued throughout. The four doors were the first Minors to have the trim colours entirely coordinated with the exterior colour. The previous policy had been the trim supplied in the same shade with different colour piping, but all using the same beige material colour. Initially, the four-door was only available as an export-only model, so the fact this car did end up being sold on the home market makes it a little bit of a red herring. An export, of course, was absolutely the name of the game for initial post-war British motor industry, because steel supplies were rationed and companies were only receiving their rations if they promised to export high amounts of product. So that basically meant that if you lived abroad, it was quite easy to get a Morris Minor. But if you lived in this country, you could have been waiting a long time. And the year that this car was produced, 1951, 95% of Morris cars produced were going abroad. So it was a massive number. However, in 1951, there was an economic squeeze in Canada, and this meant that new car sales briefly collapsed. And as a result, Morris, or rather Nuffield organisation, said, well, we're not going to have cars sitting abroad, ship them back, convert them over to right-hand drive and sell them in this country, which is exactly what happened to this car. And it was then sold at Maud's of Norwich, the main Nuffield dealer for cars in the area, and it provided the first owner with good service, and it was well maintained until it was laid up in the mid-1960s. It was then found by a chap in the 1980s who then restored it pretty much to running spec and then started using it again. He then passed away and the car ended up being purchased by a man called Richard. Seems like quite a few people have owned this car called Richard, and it is now being purchased by current Richard, who is intending to use it for light duties. Richard tells me to own in 2022. This car is a fascinating piece of history, and with the right type of driving, patience, road choice, as you'll see in this video, and using gears correctly, it will trundle along all day without any fuss or worry. A little bit like cars that you would have seen in the 1950s. It could do fantastic mileage, it just needs to be maintained. Now, if you're thinking after watching this video that you'd rather go for an earlier car than the usual later cars, please approach it with caution, because parts availability on a Minor that isn't a later car, they just aren't very great. And although you can still get all your core mechanicals and service parts, all your other bits and pieces are far harder to get. So let's crack on with this road trip. We're going to show you what we've been up to. Now, there's nothing quite like listening to an engine running when it's at full pelt. So I'm going to let you have a little listen to the car before we stop off at our first stop, the Great British Car Journey. The first stop on our A-Road adventure was to the Great British Car Journey. Now, of course, I've been a few times before. You'll have seen me borrow the Hillman Imp from them, the Chrysler. I came down when they first opened, but Richard hadn't been, so I wanted to show him the museum. So one of our first stops was really to go for a walk through the museum, have a look at all the fantastic cars on display. And of course, if you haven't been before, I do recommend it. It is a great day out, wheelchair friendly. You can bring kids round, and they've got voiceovers telling you all about the cars. It's good value for money day out. And also, don't forget, if you don't know this already, already, you can borrow one of the cars from Drive Dad's car, and you can actually drive some of these cars as well. So we headed off from here and carried on down to Coventry. By this point, we've done, well, best part of 100 miles, and it was going really well. It looks quite light from the outside, but as you can see on the inside, it's completely dark. You only get a couple of dials lit up. So we took about an hour or so to get down to Coventry, and again the car performed faultlessly. It did really well. But Richard's done all the driving so far, so I thought I'd ask him how it's all going.
So we've just driven from West Yorkshire, Firebrooks, celebrating our arrival. We've just driven from West Yorkshire down to where we are now, which is just outside Coventry. We stopped off in Derby at the Great British Car Journey to do filming and what have you. But literally we've gone from West Yorkshire down to Coventry, about 100 and something miles we've done today. It's a longer journey than normal. We've not taken any motorways, but honestly, you can sit in this thing 50, just under 48, 50, you know, on the flat, and it seems absolutely fine. Long, continuous hills, it does begin to sort of your third, and if you time it badly, second, you're sort of crawling on up them. But if it's sort of up, down, up, down, up, down, it's not too bad generally, you know. And as I say, it's been absolutely fine mechanically. You know, so we picked up this morning. No real faults at all with the car. Nothing. It's just taken everything in its stride so far, which is brilliant, and it's a testament to it. Really, it's a minor that a lot of people, to be brutally honest, would not probably want to do the journey in, because it is technically the slowest Morris Minor. It's a side valve, it's a 4-door highlight, it's not streamlined as a low light, and it's heavier than a low light, not by much, but it is technically the slowest Minor, and it's, you know, it's no speed demon, but it's done absolutely fine, and it's got us here, and you know, it's been, touch wood, absolutely spot on, which is fantastic.
Now, we're not mic'd up today because whilst the car made it unscathed, the microphone setup hasn't, and it got loads of water into it, and now it's broken. So unfortunately, the sound of this video is going to be probably a little bit hit and miss, but it's all about the adventure for us. So how many miles have we done now? We've done about
100 miles so
ish, 120?
Yeah. 120 odd, I think.
Yeah.
From where we collected it. Yeah. It's about that. And yeah, no, it's been, well, faultless so far, so we'll have to see how we go, but it's been, touch wood, touch metal dashboard, it's been very good so far, so onwards and upwards, as it were.
Have we got any wood in this car that we can touch?
There will be behind, oh no, there won't on this one actually.
We should have got a traveller, then we would have had a wood to touch as we drove along.
Oh no, there's a wood gear knob.
Oh yes, touch wood, touch wood.
Non-standard item, but never mind.
Right, should we set off for Somerset?
We'll set off.
Okay, we'll show you some of it as we go along. To be fair, I definitely thought we would have broken down by now, so I was very impressed with the car and how she was performing. So we carried on through, and we drove through little villages and little areas, and before you know it, we were in Gloucestershire. Now, Richard said to me, I've got to show you Campbell Airfield. We weren't able to get in, but there's plenty of scrap planes, and if you're going through the area, I would advise doing a little detour so you can see all the bits and pieces from the road as you go. I think we're doing pretty well with a broken microphone, a car that won't go above 50 miles an hour. And when was you last taken on a big drive, Richard?
And 8 years ago.
8 years ago. We're doing well with rescuing these cars this year that never get driven. Anyway, I'm sitting in the back, and the best thing about Morris Minor is, let me show you if I can see, you can see there's plenty of room between my hair and the roof of the car. I mean, what more can I ask for? I've also got quite a lot of room in the back as well, so you can see my suitcase here, and we've got a Sainsbury's bag here, and I'll cut away and show you that I've got plenty of leg room as well. So I think a lot of people think that cars like this just aren't very usable, when in fact really it's only people's beliefs that are limiting them. Now we're trucking on quite well. We've got about an hour and a half to go, and hopefully we're going to be able to show you some nice villages soon, because I feel like we've been waiting ages to see some of these nice villages, but let's crack on. For those of you watching at home, we are travelling on Foss Way, which for the uninitiated is an old Roman road. So whilst it isn't going to take us directly into Somerset, it is one of the roads that we're going down. We're also going to see Richard now tackle a hill. This one seems quite treacherous.
Get the speed up. And she's losing it already.
What speed are you doing, Richard?
I don't know. It's saying 35.
I don't know.
No,
ambitious. That is not 35.
Third gear. There we go. Hang on. The sun visor down. I can't see a bloody thing. I think I might have been a bit late changing into third. But it's not stopped. And that was quite a hill.
So what speed are we on now?
Well, it says just under 30. But I reckon we're doing about 20.
There is no way we're doing 30. We're about to be overtaken by someone on a mobility scooter.
No, we're just...
See, I think this is a really good example actually for all the people that think we should have taken a motorway, is we can say, well, look at what happens if you get a slight incline. I mean, look at what happened, you know, that motorway near Sheffield is pretty, you know, it's pretty ropey, so right, on we go. Now by this point in the journey, we've done nearly 200 miles away from our starting point, because of course we did a detour and we've done all the A roads. So it would have been a lot quicker if we'd taken the main roads, but we wouldn't have seen half the exciting stuff that we'd seen and stopped off and had just as much of a laugh. And we felt quite relaxed because the oil levels were fine, the water levels, the car wasn't running hot, there were no problems. So Richard said, you've got two choices now to get back to where we need to get to in Somerset. So we can either go through Bath and see all the architecture and see some interesting bits and pieces, or we can go through a few older villages and see some of the thatched cottages and bits and pieces. We didn't have time for both because of course it's November and time was really against us because it gets dark quite quickly. So being selfish, I decided that we'd go through Bath, because I've only ever been here to stop off for store openings when I worked for Go Outdoors, and I've never actually seen the city itself. So I said to Richard, let's stop off. And there were two places that I wanted to see that I've only ever seen in photographs. The first stop would be the Royal Circus, and the second stop was going to be Crescent. I've never seen these places in the flesh, but they're really interesting examples of Georgian architecture, and I absolutely love architecture. And I thought, if you're watching this at home and you've only ever seen photographs, you might appreciate seeing it in the flesh. So our first stop, as you see here, is the Circus. It's a historic ring of large townhouses built by John Wood the Elder, well, designed by John Wood the Elder, built between 1754 and 1768. Now the second stop is the Royal Crescent. It's a row of 30 terraced houses laid out in a sweeping crescent and designed by John Wood the Younger, built between 1767 and 1774. These are all Grade 1 listed buildings, which means that any changes you make, even the very smallest of changes, have to be signed off. Now these houses go for over £1 million each, and they are some of the best examples of Georgian architecture. Now it's time for our final leg, and for interest of security purposes, we won't be showing you exactly where Richard lives. But before we go home, it's time for me to grab the keys and tell you what I think of this little car. Richard has trusted me with his pride and joy, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified that something was going to happen. It's not the gear change that's getting me. I mean, that's up into fourth, because when you drive cars like this, you get up to fourth quite quickly. It's not the gear change that's killing me, actually. It's the where the gear stick is. I'm going to reach in. I must say, I'm really proud of Richard for driving this back, because it's been over 220 miles from Huddersfield to here. And Richard's done it. He's not complained once. He's worked his way through this box. He hasn't driven a Morris Minor in a few months. You know, he's just been in his modern stuff, and I think he's done a stellar job. And we've had really good fun as well. And I think that's part of the fun of classic cars, is that you get to have fun. It's not just boring driving from A to B. And I said all along that I was really annoyed that we were doing all the A roads. I said, oh Richard, it's going to take forever. And it's taken us about 8 hours, 7-8 hours, a ridiculous amount of time anyway. But we have had so much fun, to the point where actually maybe next time I'll skip the motorway a little bit and take a few of the A roads, because we've seen that plane graveyard, we got to see Bath, we got to see the Great British Car Journey. We got to see so much on this trip that we just wouldn't have seen if we were just bombing down the motorway, going as fast as we could from A to B. Now, driving this car, it's lovely, but these brakes are absolutely dire, and they are not the ones for me. Get me back in my 1968 1098 engine with that lovely gearbox, and I will crack on. I mean, I'm not going to complain, because this lovely lady that we've been driving for over 200 miles in November is 70 years old. I think she's done a cracking job. I am loath to say a single bad word about her, because she's done the whole journey faultlessly. No oil used, no water used, no problems. She has just been an absolute diamond. And people ask me all the time, what classic cars should I get? And I always say, look at a Morris Minor, because they are good fun, easy to drive, and you make lots of friends. And in fact, without Morris Minors, I wouldn't have met my lovely friend Richard. So all in all, it's been an entirely pleasing couple of days driving down. I was absolutely dreading it, and we've had so much fun, and it's been great. This perhaps is a little bit too antiquated for me. I'm not a side valve kind of gal, I'm more of a 1098, but it has been good fun nonetheless. So that's kind of it from me today, really. It's been a pleasure taking you on this road trip with us. It's been a very different sort of video. We've had mic issues, all sorts going on, but I hope despite sound troubles and filming woes that you have enjoyed this video just as much as we enjoyed making it. So that leaves me to say, until next Sunday, take care and drive safely.